The truth is, I don't know who gets these videos. I don't know at what level they're actually received. Anything else is conjecture. I don't have any understanding of what could justify this. But it has been brought to my attention that something has happened that it's not just a line in the sand. It's not the moment of the creation of the spectacular individual that I know you're all waiting for. It's the kind of thing where it's a justifiable explosive moment. That moment, like the one in Millennium Park, where the ancestress spoke up and all of the calculations came together and there was nothing left. I have already made a transcript before midnight. I made a public notice in two forums. I believe what I have just found in the primary source documents concerning coinage laws in the United States has revealed something that is so gargantuanly amoral and unacceptable that it necessarily justifies the delegitimization of the United States of America as being acknowledged as a sovereign nation state, that it justifies the formal dissolution of the federal union and calls into question anything that would substantiate the legitimacy of any state constitution that agreed to participate in the federal union. Now, this evidence goes back more than 200 years, in some cases more than 250 years, but what it shows is a continuing process of, despite whatever resistance there may be at the time, a perpetuation of a process that was enabled by Europeans specifically, but not exclusively, entities that is just completely unacceptable. And with what's going on with COVID 19 and the complete misrepresentations and fabrications about what it really portends, as well as how it's connected to the first Kyoto and then Paris climate accords, and how that was never actually really spoken about in a direct manner, just verifies that it's gone too far. It's gone on too long. That there's no point in trying to make a pretense anymore. I came to have great faith in and patriotism in my country in an effort to recover what was good and noble from slander and misrepresentation. But more and more, the need to take responsibility for financial impropriety and malfeasance compelled an examination of the primary source documents that underpinned the actual workings of the United States financial system. And while this kind of criminality and this kind of inconsciability predates the United States, the specific manner in which the United States whetted the appetite of others that were more than happy to exploit the novelty of what the United States presented, necessarily means that if we in the United States have any actual integrity left, that we need to dissolve ourselves so that they can be prevented from any further exploitation. I think the United States, my understanding is that the United States and the Congress of the United States, at the sedence of the President of the United States, beginning in the period during and immediately following Reconstruction in the United States, is directly culpable for the pogroms that occurred in Russia in the early part of the 20th century. And that those pogroms themselves were aided and abetted by deals that were set up as part of the Civil War Reconstruction effort and the war debt assumed during the Civil War. And the manners in which the alleged Reconstruction following the Civil War were allowed to be meted out meant that people who were formerly slave owners never really actually relinquished their slave holdings and instead found other people to put in their stead, much as had occurred during the Civil War, to pay the war debt for them. I believe that there was a tendency within the United States that had a truly anti Semitic and genocidal streak to it, and that used the Civil War debt in concert with other people to conspire to liquidate Jews in other parts of the world as part of a particular kind of bond substitution scheme. And that what later ended up resulting in what has been more commonly identified as the Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazis in Germany was actually a culmination of successive periods of time wherein maturities and rollovers on bonds that were issued not exclusively by the United States but in conjunction with others were allowed to be used in consideration of coinage, including gold and silver coinage, and that the specific processes by which they identified the weighting and the encoding of the valuation, the intangible value of that coinage was predicated upon conversion of Jewish assets into a particular kind of consideration of Christian redemption. It's that blatant if you actually see it. It's that obvious, it's that precise. Was there resistance? Yes, there was. Were there efforts to try to forestall it under whatever justifications or efforts were possible at the time? There does appear there were efforts made. But what ended up happening over and over again is that actual direct resistance and articulation of the magnitude was suppressed, including suppressed in manners that I believe ended up ex post facto altering primary source records in order to obscure certain details. And the only way you would be able to put the clues together is if you were able to assemble different component parts, which I anticipate was supposed to be a part of a exclusive knowledge set only given to a certain kind or group of people. And every once in a while, in order for the scheme to work, it's demanded in some way, shape, or form an accedance and co-conspiracy by people from various areas and from various traditions that had some pedigree, some sort of actual determinate or demonstrable political capital within the communities of concern. And that when the time for the Nazi atrocities to be revealed came to bear, that what happened was a coordinated conspiracy to wait until a certain critical mass had been achieved in terms of the orchestrations of the internment system. That this was connected to not only an accumulation of data, both in terms of the processes of experimentation, but also the actual bonding of actual individuals and lives, the souls, so to speak, that were allowed to be used as the sort of investiture that was part of the bonding that itself provided the basis for the coinage, or rather what later came to be currency of another form, including paper bills that may or may not be backed with some sort of metal coins or with some other kind of consideration. And what we've had since then has been an effort to try to figure out how to keep a lid on this. And so it has been said, including by me, that the nation of Israel, for instance, has been allowed to proliferate in a manner that never compelled the United States to take full responsibility for its own history of anti-Semitism, including predating the Holocaust. I have understood this myself since I was 20 years old, but I had no idea of the full magnitude until recently. And it is so heinous and so abominable that I cannot substantiate in any way, shape, or form giving anything close to legitimacy to the current existence of the United States of America as it is. I can't. It is not legitimate. The United States of America is not a legitimate country. If it allowed this to happen, if it allowed people to be put in a position where presumably they have the authority of the people, that they are a government comprised of the people that is empowered to coin and tax, and this is the way they do it, we have no right to exist in such a manner. It is not acceptable. We do not have a right to exist. We don't. And I'm really disappointed to think that I'm 44 years old, and as much as other people thought they had an education, and as much as other people thought they had an entitlement, including a righteousness that comes from being a survivor of such heinous torture, that none of you had the courage to say it that directly and succinctly to anybody in any forum. We don't have a right to do this. We don't have a right to say that we are inheritors of this. We don't have a right to let anybody else say it either. And we don't even have a right to let anybody else say they're justified taking it over and doing it themselves. Nobody has a right to exist like this. Nobody. You don't get to claim it as reparations. You don't get to claim it as restitution. You don't get to come up with some secret elitist cabal of your own rainbow diversity spectrum to play the game out and swap different demographics at different periods in time in order to meet quotas on pre-existing bond schemes. Nobody ever had a right to do it to begin with. And there's absolutely no justification for anybody saying they don't know and that they're innocent. You wanted to coin children. You thought somehow in your expression of some sort of pugnacity, it was okay to take the innocent and to take young children and expose them in this crime spree. Well, you did. And your children do not have a right to exist in such a manner. There's no legitimacy to national belonging or social welfare under the auspices of a state apparatus that is predicated upon this kind of conspiracy. And until you repudiate it fully, you don't have a right to exist. Nobody has a right to do this. Nobody has a right to say you won't disclose it. Nobody has a right to say it's a secret or that it's confidential. Nobody has a right to say it's part of your national intelligence or security paradigm. There's no right. All it is atrocity. The sooner you admit that and stand up for yourself, the sooner we might have a chance. In the meantime, I'm going to say it bluntly. I am just fine standing all by my fucking self. You wanted to close me out. You wanted to ostracize me. You wanted to prove a point. Very well, you did. You absolutely fucking proved your point. I did not have a right to exist as an American, but neither did anybody fucking else.